Circle red, yes. Okay, so we're now recording. So tonight's topic, so just let Eve in. Welcome to Eve as well. So yeah, tonight's topic, memory, and the importance of memory, because we're going to look at understanding how memory works, especially in the neurodivergent brain, common challenges that we may face, tools and techniques to boost recall, some memory hacks, hopefully, which you can take on board, and just things to go away with and think about in terms of how your memory works and how you can improve your memory. And we'll hopefully hear from yourselves a little bit as well, and you can share what works for you, what doesn't work for you. It'd be really nice to hear all of your voices as well. So let's start with the basics. What is memory? So basically, memory is how our brain stores, keeps, retrieves information when we need it. But it's important to know that memory isn't just like one single thing, it's a multitude of things. Lots of things are going on in our brains when we're trying to access a memory. So there's different systems that work, some independently, some in conjunction with each other, to retrieve those memories, to re-access them. Sometimes it's smooth, sometimes not so smooth, especially in neurodiverse minds, as a number of you might know. But we've got short-term memory, we've got long-term memory, working memory, emotional memory, procedural memory. And in combination, these things work together or against each other, maybe even. But these are all components of our memories and how they work. So go into a bit more depth on how each of them work. Your short-term memory is like the mental clipboard that you have. It holds information for just a few seconds, such as remembering a phone number, for long enough to be able to type it in and call someone. This sort of memory can slip away quickly, especially if you're distracted, interrupted. It's one of those bits of the memory which can easily fall away and quickly. Working memory, on the other hand, is your brain's juggling space, if you like. It helps you to hold and use information at the same time. So it is short term, it is in the moment, but it's like following a recipe, for example, or keeping on track of a conversation, perhaps. It's what you're having to do with your memory in real time. Long-term memory is your internal library, if you look at it like that. It's like going to the library and things are stored away. Some things are stored away for a long time, other things are newer, more recent in the repertoire of the library. So you've got experiences, facts, skills that we store in our long-term memory. And amongst neurodivergent people, long-term memory can be a really strong aspect of memory. Recall of long-term memories often quite good, but I'll ask you all about what you think about that in a bit. Emotional memory, and emotion is important to memory, links to our feelings and experiences. So how a song makes us feel, something that we haven't listened to for a long time, it comes up again, and is that emotion that we get. It's an emotional memory. The same with scent. We smell a smell that we remember from somewhere, and it brings us joy. It brings us peace, perhaps, or anger, or something like that. So for some people, these memories feel much stronger, the emotional ones. For others, they can be really detailed. For others, they can be more subtle. What I didn't put on the slide, actually, which you should have done, is like the procedural memory, which we had on the previous slide. Procedural memory is like the step-by-step memories, the know-how memories. How do I get from A to B? I have to go through these particular steps to get to my destination. So procedural steps can be quite a challenge for neurodiverse individuals, but once trained, once practiced, once used multiple times, can become really strong. But let's look a bit more at the like scientific aspects. So I'm throwing a lot of information at you at the start, but just to sort of give a better picture to you all. Now, if you notice, these are all the areas of the brain which are involved in memory, the different types of memory and recall. So the hippocampus, crucial for forming new memories, learning and navigating spaces. And incidentally, on the right-hand side, that's more accurate to where those parts of the brain are. On the left-hand side was a bit inaccurate. It was just sort of pointing to the brain. So I put that on there as well, so you know roughly where in the brain these things are. The prefrontal cortex manages your working memory, attention. It's all in the frontal lobe of the brain and helps with decision making related to memories. The amygdala processes the emotional memories, especially those linked to like fear. Your fight or flight responses are affected there. Then you've got the cerebellum, procedural memories, which relate to that. The temporal lobe, your more long-term memories. But they interact with each other. They, in people who have brain injury, they'll find that one area of the brain is damaged. Another area begins to learn and adapt and take on board the memory skills that the other part of the brain can no longer do. So new neural pathways can be produced. The brain is a very powerful tool, so it adapts, changes depending on the situations and the stress it's put under. And in terms of neurodivergence, we look at ADHD, which I've got on twice there for some reason. I think that should be ASD, or autism, the right-hand side one, sorry. But ADHD, prefrontal cortex, cerebellum, basal ganglia, you might want to go away and research these in a bit more depth, depending on what you're diagnosed with, and just see how these areas of the brain affect you, affect the condition. I'll just put that there just for some guidance on if you're interested in going a bit deeper with that. But why does memory feel different in the neurodiverse brain? Well, for many neurodivergent people, memory isn't just about remembering or forgetting. It's deeply connected to how the brain processes the information in the first place. Some experience hyperfocus, where attention locks onto something very specific and so completely that eventually everything else around it fades away. You're just so focused. That's what you lock onto. And during these times, memory for that topic can be extremely strong. The details stick because the brain is fully engaged. Others experience distractibility or overload, where too much information comes in at once, and this can interrupt the brain's ability to encode the information, like begin ordering the information, so then you can store it and then later retrieve it. And then there's things like executive dysfunction as well, difficulties with planning, switching tasks, organizing your thoughts. This can affect how both memories are stored and how we then retrieve them later on. It's not just about the ability or intelligence, it's about how the brain prioritizes, filters the information differently. So before I ask everyone out there, some common things you might experience: forgetting steps in sequences, losing track of time, working memory overload, the feeling of having too many browser tabs in your brain open at once. That's a kind of a way to articulate it, maybe. Struggling with recall under pressure, remembering things when you're in a pressured situation, and difficulty transitioning between tasks, remembering what you were doing before and coming back to something as you moved on to a new task. That's quite hard for some people to get back into where they left off, remember what they were doing, how to do it, what they were doing before. So just wanted to ask the group, what memory difficulties do you find? What experiences have you got? Raise a hand, share with the group, write in the chat if you like. Be good to hear your experiences. Eve, yeah.
I think I definitely have problems with what you were saying about was it procedural memory? Because I really struggle with like sequences and tasks, and if someone gives me instructions, and I only really remember them if I can associate it with something else. So I'll forget how to do like a sequence of tasks, but if I can remember, oh, when someone was giving me the instructions, like this song was playing, and then I can remember what I was
Mm,
told. Or if I associate it with an emotion, like, oh, the last time I
mm,
forgot how to do that, I felt this, and then I remember it. It's quite interesting, I think.
mhm. Oh, thanks, Eve. Yeah, that's really interesting. So helps you to sort of do memory by association, which is something we'll come on to as well. Um, that, yeah, coupling things up and utilizing the different parts of the brain for your memory is really powerful. That's a really good strategy that you can use. Because like I said at the beginning, the brain is articulate, can do different things, and different parts of the brain can help, like with the memory that one part of the brain might do. So like you said, if you are doing something else, associating sound with a task or music with a task, when you go back to doing that again, it's easier to do. Your brain has made those connections. We've got some people in the chat here as well saying about Greta saying struggling with recall under pressure. Yeah, that's helpful to know. Forgetting what bus number I need to get despite getting the same bus every week. Thanks for sharing that, Rachel. So that's, yeah, really interesting to know that despite doing it again and again, it still kind of slips the memory. Things being out of sight and out of mind, Alex says. That's really interesting. So like you don't see it, you're not, it's not in your visual memory or presence, then it just goes by the wayside completely. Really interesting. Claire says about I find when on the spot I get in a panic and cannot think in a logical way. Yeah, so under pressure, and trying to access your memories. And Ben, constantly finding myself getting distracted or put off doing the things I need to do. So distraction, interruptions. And then you said about losing keys. So you force yourself to put them on a hook and hang them up so you don't lose them. Yeah, helpful. And we've got some more people. Exams are a struggle, as Alex says as well. And you're more practical. That's interesting. So different use of your memory and re-engaging with your retrieving your memories. Yorgos, you put your hand up. Go on.
Yeah, so for me, it's a mixture of two things. So I
Mm-hmm.
struggle with like remembering people's names, and sometimes I worry that when I do that, people think that I'm ignorant and not bother learning people's names, which is not the case. So like in my work, we've got so many people, it's hard to remember, you know, who's who and what their names are. Or if I
Mm-hmm.
remember a friend, if I can remember my friends' parents' names, I feel a bit embarrassed thinking, saying, "Oh, what's your mom and dad's name again?" Because I should remember, but because we don't spend that much time with each other, and I see them sometimes when I'm on for a walk or whatnot, that I feel bad remembering my name, and it's a case of like waiting until someone else says their name, and I'm like, "Of
Mm-hmm.
course, you're that person." Another reason is trying to remember information that's been given to me to repeat at home. Like say with my mom, for example, I would
Yeah,
listen tentatively. Is that word? Tentatively? Yeah.
yeah,
Um,
tentatively. Yeah.
yeah, tentatively when I store the information, I'm listening carefully, and I repeatedly say it again and again in my brain. And then when I actually say it verbally to my parents, I'm just like, wait, what? What did they say? Am I saying it properly word for word? So that's what it's like for
Mm-hmm.
me.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting, Yorgos. Yeah. Yeah. So, and I think Dominic in the chat as well saying about remembering names too. So yeah, absolutely. And I think sometimes when you see the face, sometimes that can be the trigger to remember the name, but maybe for some not. And maybe you see the face and you know all about the person, but the name slips your mind, which is really interesting, isn't it? It's the different details, types of information storing the information. I suppose when you're learning names, you don't always encode that information. You don't store it in a way which is like repeated. You don't constantly say the person's name when you're talking to them, or when you're doing any collaborative work with them. You're not just going to say Yorgos, are you? Because it's not normal to do that. Dominic, yeah.
Yeah, I think a few people hinted at this already, but it was. Oh,
Dom, can you hear?
sorry. Can you hear me? Can you guys hear me? Can you hear? Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
That's yeah. I was just going to say that I think that recalling of memory and trying to think about, and I'm sure you're probably moving on to this about strategies and things, but actually by association to try to think about how you think about those things. So like, as an example, me saying about names and like how to remember those names is like, I'm a visual orientated person, as opposed most people are presumably here as well, and oral as well, sound orientated. So I think peppering those kind of clues to help to bolster your own memory is what I'm trying to say. That's the thing that always allows me to kind of bolster those things.
Yeah, fantastic, Don. No, thanks for sharing that. Yeah, and again, it's tapping into the other areas, other parts of the brain, the other strengths that we've got, using those to support our memory, not just relying on, right, I'm going to remember this name by writing it down only, or I'll remember the name in my head, because obviously you're relying on one thing there. But if you build it up towards sounds, sights, smells, and by association, you've got more chance of remembering information. Thanks, Dom. And we'll look a bit more then into how this process happens, how it works. So we've got the three main stages, like I mentioned before: encoding, storage, and retrieval. But each stage needs different things to work well. So encoding, when the information first enters your brain, is where the focus and attention matter the most. If you're focused and you're fully attentive, you're not distracted, and also tiredness and overstimulation comes into play here as well. If we're feeling any of those things whilst we're trying to encode the information, it's going to fall down later on. It's going to be harder to store it. We won't store it as well, as accurately as we want to. So think about that when you're sitting down you want to memorize something, or there's something which you need to remember. Think about what you're doing at the time. Think about the space you're in. Am I distracted? How am I feeling? Am I really exhausted? That's going to affect your recall later on. The storage stage is important as well. It's about keeping that information safe over time. We might not need to retrieve that for a while. We may have a set date where we must retrieve it, or it may be tomorrow that we must retrieve it. It doesn't matter, but importantly, it's how we care for the stored information. So the brain strengthens memory through repetition, emotional relevance, which is why things we care about especially, or revisit often, are the things that tend to stick better in our memories, right? Without repetition, though, the memories can fade. So despite us caring about things deeply, yes, we will remember them better. But if we remind ourselves of those things, the things we want to remember, and we do it through things like repetition, of course, when you sit down to do an exam, the number one thing that we go to is, right, we need to repeat the information. If we repeat it once, twice, 3 times, more chance that we're going to remember it again. But we have to remember to do that with a lot of the memories we want to store. It's not just about sitting down and doing an exam and memorizing. After an exam, what happens? We all just forget about what we did in the exam. It's gone, we passed. We don't think about it again. In real life, things are happening at 100 miles per hour. We don't stop to think, right, what could I do to make sure I don't forget that? Should I repeat that, review that task again tomorrow, so I make sure I don't forget it by Sunday? It's those little things, simple things that we can forget in the everyday. So then we've got obviously the retrieval stage. So with retrieval, we're reaccessing that memory, the information that we stored at stage 2. But again, retrieval, where are we? What were we doing at the time when we want to retrieve the memory? The context is important. For example, you might remember a name when you're back in the same place where you first heard it. You were in the office, you were sat in your chair, the person said to you, introduce themselves. That's maybe where you remember it. Maybe it was via an email you received when you were at home. Again, it's by association. So think about where you are, what you're doing at the time of encoding, but also try to think about replicating that if it's at all possible when you come back to trying to retrieve it. And that's why I tell a lot of my students as well, when you're doing revision for your exams, think about the space you're in. Go and revise anatomy, or anatomy of the arm or the shoulder. Go and review that in the library in room 201. When you go to practice it again, go back to that room and do the same sort of anatomy again. In your exam, you need to put yourself in that room again mentally and think, okay, I was in library room 201, I was doing this. You're more likely to come back to that memory again. The information will be more fluid, more prominent in your mind. So hopefully you can do better on the exam with it, just by association and through thinking about it as well, not only being present, because obviously in an exam we can't can't run off to the library quickly, can we? So for neurodivergent people, any break in this cycle, these 3 steps, like the sensory overload, like the lack of focus, like the disruptedness of distractions around you, is going to make it harder to stick. That information is going to be much harder to glue, even more so than the neurotypical person. Okay, and Dom, you put in there about music and songs are a big one for me. Yeah, absolutely, Dom. Yeah, I think lots of students I have as well find playing calming music, or even the opposite end of the scale, energetic music whilst they're revising or doing something they need to remember, as really helpful. And then listening to it again whilst they're needing to retrieving information. So hopefully that makes sense to everyone. But importantly, the role of emotion. And this is one of the big distractors or big supporters of your memory. It plays a huge role in how we remember things as well, not only if we remember things. When something feels really meaningful, rather, like something we really enjoyed, something we're really curious about or interested in, something we have a connection to, those things the brain tags as important. It's a mental tag, because it strengthens the neural pathways that store that memory, the emotional layer to it, which makes it naturally easier to recall. But not all emotions help us with memory, of course. Not all in the same way, that is. So stress, anxiety, those are emotions too. They can activate our fight or flight systems. When this happens, the brain focuses on survival, not detail. So we're just like battling, we're firefighting. We want to get through what we've got to get through. We may be on autopilot, working through, battling through, but we're not paying attention to the details as much because we're under pressure, we're stressed, we're anxious about it. So we battle through, the feeling of panic ensues, but we forget then what was actually said or done. When we come to recall it later, it's gone and it's harder to retrieve. So this can be especially relevant to neurodivergent people who may experience heightened emotional sensory responses. So I wondered if anyone feels that. So do you feel when you're needing to remember something, at the encoding stage, you feel stressed, anxious, and then when we get to point C, when we need to retrieve the information, our emotional state at that point, how is that? Do you find it difficult to remember things depending on what emotional state you're in? Anyone care to share their experiences with that? How does emotion affect you with your memory? So, oh yes, Greta's put, yes, pressure to remember something makes it harder to remember sometimes. Okay. In terms of stress as well. Thanks, Greta. Memory, as Rachel said, is worse when anxious or stressed. Okay. And what about the positive memories though? Do you remember things fondly when it was something that you really enjoyed, you're really curious about, you connected with? Oh yes, Yorgos, go for it.
So I don't know if this answers the question you were intended, but so a couple of days ago I was at a concert seeing JLS with my friend, and just hearing all their songs brought me back to my high school years when they were big. And the supporting act for JLS was the DJ Example, and he had a lot of bangers. I don't know if he's still current now, but he had a lot of bangers back in. I sound old now. Back in the day, and I just remembered, yeah, like Greta says, nostalgic, and like I said, going back to high school, and yeah, they were lots of memories. And I want to reiterate who said about music. It was Dominic. Yeah, I listened to a piece of music and it just brought me back, childhood. And say if me and my friend love this song, every time it comes on, it just brings a smile to my face. So music really is a positive impact for my memories.
Fantastic. Yeah, thanks, Jordan. I first of all didn't know JLS was still a thing. I didn't know they were together.
Neither did I until my friend said.
Yeah.
Yeah, neither did I until my friend said, "Oh, they're still going. Do you want to go?" And I was like, "Yeah."
Thanks, Jordan. Great. And Ben is said in the chat as well, I found myself having a really high energy day where I've done a lot and I've enjoyed myself. They bring back lots of memories. Brilliant. Exactly what I was getting towards. Your emotional state makes a big difference. And Alex saying about how he used to be a chef, and sometimes when it really kicked off, like Saturday night or very busy shift, I would forget recipes and people's names. Yeah, the pressure sets in, the anxiety, the stress of the moment. Yeah, begin to forget things. Jazz, 100%. Stress makes my memory a lot worse, which then makes me more stressed. So it's like a knock-on effect, and cascade effect makes it worse. Positive emotions also make memories a lot clearer for me. And I find that the connections from triggers of the memories are a lot faster. Perfect. Yeah. That's what we're getting towards. It's the idea that when you're trying to encode information, it's important to you. We need to try and find sense of calm, first of all, because if we're not calm, it's going to be hard to do anything. We need to find a space where we're feeling less anxious. And the way to feel less anxious is some of the things we've said. Putting some music on and listening to that to get us into a state of, being able to focus, perhaps being able to feel a bit more happy about the situation, but attaching enjoyable, interesting things to the task at hand. If we're trying to memorize difficult information, what we want to do is try and attach interesting things, gamify things, make it a more of a game. Attach interesting names to things which have difficult names. I'll come to an example of that in a bit. But yeah, emotion is important. So when you're having to sit down and memorize something, I know we don't always stop and think, right, I have to memorize this thing, because in everyday life, we don't always have the time to stop and memorize things. But think about and reflect upon what your emotions are like when you're needing to come back and remember something and recall information. Try and think about that and write down what are the emotions I often have in these moments. But when do I feel at my best? When do I feel, like Ben was saying, able to have a good day and feel joy and memorize things a lot better? What are the emotions and what things put you in that emotional state? because that's one of the keys to being able to memorize and access your memories more effectively. So I wanted to go on a little bit about the importance of inner speech, and I was talking to someone about this just yesterday, and a few people over the past couple of weeks. Inner speech is kind of like your internal narrator. It's if you talk to yourself mentally in your mind. Now, some people do this. I know that I do it personally. Some people don't, and it's not a thing for them because it's just not encoded into their brains to do that. That inner voice, inner speech, acts as a kind of mental workspace. You know, where you're holding the short-term memories, for example, information, reminding us of steps that we've taken, even coaching ourselves through decision making. So I don't know, I want to put it out there to you. Who has an inner speech? Who talks to themselves and has that internal monologue or dialogue, whatever you want to call it? Do you talk yourself through situations? You want to go? Yeah.
Yeah, I do it all the time. Like, say if I'm approaching people and I want to ask them something or talk about something, I think about what I'm going to say in my head. And sometimes I predict what the reaction would be like, whether it be positively or negatively. And I try to phrase things in phrase things, more positively, and hopefully get a positive reaction.
Yeah, interesting. You thought ahead to what I've got on the next slide about thinking about others and what they're thinking. But that's helpful to know. I'm glad that you have that kind of inner monologue. Anyone else that sort of talks to themselves, even though it sounds a bit strange? Do you talk yourself? Can you hear a kind of voice talking you through, your own voice, talking you through situations? Dominic?
Yeah, I feel like, again, it comes back to like stress or anxiety.
Okay.
Like, I feel like it ramps up if I've got a lot of tasks or things during the day or whatever it is that I'm about to do. I find that internal memory kind of ramps up. That makes sense. So you're kind of like, you're waiting. It's almost thinking about what if this or this is going to happen, or the sort of, the things of possibilities that might happen, or what ifs, so to speak. And I think, that internal speech kind of ramps up, depending on the situation. So if I'm like preparing for a lecture or something like that, sometimes I'll just go over like almost like a monologue, like an auto cue of what I'm going to say.
Interesting.
And it's like, that's my way of processing what I'm about to go into as well.
Yeah, really interesting. Good examples. But it is essentially what's happening is, by having an internal monologue and talking through the things in your mind, what happens in research, what research has showed is that in MRI scans as well on some patients in several studies, which I'll share, neural activation takes place. So this inner monologue, inner speech, activates similar brain regions associated with speech production and comprehension. So you're like mentally rehearsing the information, but at the same time, you're developing these neural pathways, these new connections, just because you're talking it through mentally. If you were talking to another person, you're doing the same kind of thing. But when you haven't got someone there with you, what do? Do you just write it down? Do you just visually look at it? No, if you've got an internal monologue as well, you're kind of substituting that person who would normally be there talking it through with you, and you're doing it internally. And it all links into this thing called phonological loop, which is a component of the working memory, and it helps with encoding and retention of the information. So that's really interesting, because I know some people might not have that internal monologue, and rather they may see things in picture, see things in sound, see things, maybe not voice, but other sounds. Some people have described to me that they have a sense of volume, like things are louder when they're trying to work and memorize things, or they might be quieter if they're finding difficulties with encoding information. So I just thought that was really interesting and wanted you all to sort of think about whether that happens for you, and whether you can catch yourself at times. Am I having those inner thoughts? And does it help if you can do that? And if not, maybe try doing that. As weird as it sounds, try talking to yourself. Even if you have to vocalize it and read out loud and say it out loud, try doing that when you're encoding information, learning things, memorizing things. And even if that's like appointments, you've got to an appointment, you often forget the times and dates. Say it out loud to yourself. Write it down, picture it, say it out loud as well, and try and get that into your processing. But what Yorgos was saying, which I think was Yorgos was mentioning, this is theory of mind, that understanding of others' thoughts and emotions, which is another layer of the memory, the ability to imagine what others might think or feel. So like when we experience, when we remember experiences, we often reconstruct them as stories, perhaps narratives that involve people, motives, emotions. And this process is called, it's called again, dialogic inner speech, like the internal monologue I was discussing. You might want to research that a little bit. It's like having a mini conversation in your head. It engages the same brain areas used, empathy, reflection, deepening how memory is encoded. But when you're doing that and thinking about what the others in the situation might be thinking or feeling, this is really powerful. And again, brain imaging demonstrates that different areas of the brain are firing when we're thinking about what another person might be thinking or feeling. It's a deeply emotional way of thinking through things. So it's not just about internal monologue, although as you're having those theory of mind, thinking of other people's thoughts, you're doing the internal monologue, but the extension of that, thinking about what other people might think, demonstrates another layer of enhanced processing. You're processing information at a higher level. It's not just about you, it's about, okay, what might that perspective, what that person, how would they look at it from their perspective? The teacher's up there, he might be demonstrating a completely different view to me. How would he look at it if I flip the classroom around and look at it from his eyes? It's that sort of thing. And all of these things, if you can articulate these ways of thinking, can help you with, again, train these parts of your brain, which help inevitably with your memory. So just wanted really you all to sort of reflect on that and think, do you do this? And if not, can you try doing it and see what happens? See if it enhances the way you think about things and store the information. So yeah, and this kind of, again, it's very scientific. Sorry about it being so scientific tonight, but I thought it was important to sort of share these concepts with you because it is at the heart of memory. It's not just the basics of, repeat, rinse, repeat, look, see, cover, do, that kind of approach which you would have learned at school. So neuroplasticity, if you think about, our brains are plastic, meaning they constantly adapt. They're moldable, they're shapeable, and they can be rewired based on experience and thought, which is why I'm telling you about all these modes of thinking, because you can change the way your brain thinks. You can rewire things, you can make new connections. So you know how to do that and what thought processes are behind that. You might be better able to adapt and make that happen. So like I was saying, inner speech is key, but also some neuroimaging studies. So that spoken language and just using what's called Broca's and Wernicke's areas of the brain means that you can process steps as well as process internal thought. So you might want to research that as well. And again, I'll share it on the slides. But I wanted to jump ahead a bit to the some of the strategies. So let's have a look at some strategies which we know on the ground can work and which will feed into the kind of things I'm talking about before. So visual memory strategies. A couple of people have said about how visually they make sense of information better. Does anyone here remember things best through images, pictures? Anyone care to share? That could be mind mapping, color coding, using imagery, symbols, pictures, visual storytelling. Does anyone do that? And how do you use that? You do. Yeah, Dom. Go for it. Oh, I think you're muted.
Sorry, I'm not having much
Okay.
luck.
That's all right.
Yeah, I do it I was going to say I do it all the time with like having journals or even like just having different kind of like even paper materials to signify different things. Like if I'm doing like day-to-day tasks, I might just have like a big postage note. As sad as that sounds, just anything that sort of actually like color can kind of signify like what I'm doing in that particular time and day. Yeah, so stuff like that is good. You know, I tend to use a hybrid of both physical notes and also like memos as well, and like digital kind of, you know, on your phone to-do lists and that sort of stuff as well. Because sometimes even I find memory is, you know, I can be sort of sat at a desk for ages, and it's also sometimes my recall isn't that great until I'm moving around. So I can, you know, be driving a car or go to the supermarket, you know, and if I'm moving about, sometimes my memories can kind of flood in a lot quicker in those very kind of in between spaces or wherever I am other than my desk, so to speak. So I think it's kind of, yeah, it's a combination of those things really. But yeah, physical I find is just the best. And that feels like it's the best way to recall what I'm doing a lot of the time.
Yeah, I see. That's really helpful. Thanks, Tom. And all of this is very creative thinking. And the strengths of neurodiverse people tends to be on the creative side, which is why these us doing things by association, again, like color coding, Dom, using sticky notes, coupling things together in a way which is more creative, is going to inevitably enhance your memory. Yes, Eve, go for it.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I use visual memory strategies quite a lot as well, but then sometimes it's quite funny because I won't remember the thing that I'm like actually trying to remember. So like, for example, my friends would always laugh at me in language classes because if we had a vocab list, I could never remember what the word meant in like Arabic or English, but I would be able to say, oh, it was on this page and it was in red and it was like 2 words up from the bottom. So sometimes I remember things in like really specific detail because of the visual memory, but I don't remember like what I'm actually being expected to remember. So I don't know if anyone has any like advice on that or anything.
Yeah, so very strong like visuospatial memory, but then kind of the encoding of specific words and meanings kind of falls by the wayside a little bit. But I think what you mentioned there with vocab lists, do you couple up vocabulary with image then, for example, or color?
Yeah, it would just be like in textbooks and things, I'll remember exactly what it looked like. I just don't remember.
Yeah.
But then once I realized that that was a strength and that's something that my brain naturally does, I like try and use it to my advantage. So if I'm struggling to think of a word, then I'll think, oh, well, how long was it? Like, were the letters like tall or small? And that sort of visual memory can sometimes give me a clue to the word that I'm looking for.
I see. So little clues, and perhaps like integrating some of the things we discussed before, and some of the things here, like try different types of visual strategies, because if vision is your strength, another powerful one is visual storytelling, which I've got there as well, which is like turning the information, like that list of vocab, put it into the context of a story, a mini narrative, because your brain is wired better to remember sequences of like a story as opposed to like a list of information. Often lists, it's easy to forget, right, what was the fourth or fifth on the list, because it's very linear. But if you articulate it and expand it out in a kind of linear, horizontal linear manner, like a storytelling manner, a timeline, it can be easier to recall. Dom, yeah. Oh, did you put your hand up by mistake? Perhaps.
Doing that. I was going to say, for someone who teaches film or visual storytelling film, a good there's a couple of good methods that I'd maybe recommend to people. Actually, like with my students, particularly because they're visual orientated, is we get them to create what is called a pitch deck. And obviously for people who are not filmmakers and don't know what that is, a pitch deck is essentially a kind of a conceptual map, if you like, of what your film could be, you know. So it could be like what the characters might be, you know, like a sort of a biog of the characters, but it's just using like stock images basically. You know, it's not the actual characters, it's just sort of a kind of plan of like how you're going to formulate that in a way, like extrapolate it. So I think that's quite good, and maybe actually that could be a good way of kind of visually thinking about those words or the shape of them, you know, of like what that word means. Because I'm kind of similar in some ways, where I still remember the space of something or the shape of something, but I struggle with spelling the word. So, but if you've got something there, like a placeholder, if you like, then that kind of helps to put things together as well. And the other method that I was thinking of, actually, which is something I'm researching at the minute, is as a creative pedagogy method, is a thing called, we call it a sketchbook film. And what it is effectively is, as an example here, we have students who make a collaborative film in their second year of studies, and we've had students in previous years make a horror film. And what it is that they don't get assessed on the film, the overall film. They get assessed on this thing called a sketchbook film, which is basically their, if you like, their memory, like in a memory bank, like a reflective film of the processes that they've been through. And I wonder if, you know, from people from all walks of life in this chat might find that quite useful as a way to kind of decode the things that they may be thinking about, or yet again trying to sort of, you know, put, before you get pen to paper, maybe it could be like you're talking through it, and it might be like more of a biog thing, or a, you know, a kind of like an extension of voice notes, or a video blog, or whatever, you know, a blogger or a TikTok video or whatever it is. But yeah, I just think it's like a good vehicle, really, to a good method to think about that before you even got to the finished hurdle of whatever that thing is that you're making or writing about. So I don't know, I think a lot of dyslexic people probably benefit from that. Personally, I think that's a great idea, and I'm using that method myself. So yeah, I don't know, it could be something that people are interested in, and if people are interested, I've got some examples that I'm quite happy to share on that front as well. So
yeah, I was going to ask you that. Yeah, you can share that would be amazing. Give us another sort of example of what you're describing there, but use the word vehicle, which I think is a nice way, because we need a way to transport this information, don't we? The information can be heavy, hard to carry, in which case if we've got something which helps us carry that information through and code into recall, then by all means, that's really good.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I think that it's all about process, isn't it?
Mm,
Rather than end
yeah.
product or end goal, and I think that's really, really important.
Mhm.
Anyway.
Yeah. Thanks, Don. No, that's really helpful. Please share. And so yeah, similar to kind of what we're discussing there, the storytelling as an example. If you imagine a scenario, you're studying anatomy, you need to remember the order of small bones in the wrist, and there's lots of them. They're terribly difficult words to even, imagine remembering. So imagine if you've got to go and have a test on that, and you've got to remember them, spelt correctly, things like that, or at least be able to recall how they're pronounced. Looking at it in a list or in a mind map, or I think Nicola said about mind maps not being that helpful to her. Maybe that doesn't work for everyone, both linear and mind maps. Maybe we need something like a vehicle, like Don was explaining, something like this. And I've thrown this together. I don't even know if it makes sense, but it made sense to me, and that's the important thing. So I changed the words to things which are more meaningful, which make more sense, and a bit of a story. The sacred little Luna creature tripped over a pebble while walking on a trap laid by a tricky captain with a hammer. Instantly, I think I would remember those keywords a bit easier, especially if I go through the process of internal monologue, talking it back to myself, repeat, retrieval, the look, see, do approach as well, and talking it through with others as well, like externalizing the information. Because a lot of what we're doing and what we're talking about is externalizing as well as internalizing. We're using tools, we're using post-it notes, we're using things outside of our brains to hold and carry a lot of information. But at the same time, we're repeating the information internally, which will make it stick better. So that's just a little example there, which could help. And auditory verbal strategies, recording and replaying notes. So we've got plenty of sort of AI apps and opportunities. One I came across recently was Google Notebook LM, which turns things into audio, what they call podcasts or audio presentations. Quite amazing. You put the information in and it produces it for you. You've got an instant recall of information going on, which is external to your brain. All right, don't become reliant on it, but use it as a tool. Talk through the tasks aloud, like we've said, with others, but also internally. Use rhythm, rhyme, or song. Teach it to someone else. Use active learning strategies like, okay, I need to learn this information, but by myself teaching it to you, it's going to help me learn it because I'm going over it, I'm vocalizing it. And then, if I do that again and again, it's just going to become more common to my vocabulary. Yorgos, yeah.
Hi, Baz. I missed it. What was the AI thing that you mentioned about recording? Was it recording?
Yes. It's called Google Notebook LM.
Google Notebook.
So
Okay.
I'll share it all with you. You just need to have a Google account. It's free.
Okay, I think I've got that.
It's really amazing. I've been playing around with it recently, so yeah, it's quite a good one. That. Yeah, thanks, Al, saying about it. Reminded, what was it? This one reminded you of Finding Nemo. That's my version, or AI's version of Finding Nemo there. So yeah, it's audio, visual, verbal strategies, and then like sensory anchors. Connect memories with the senses. We talked about it earlier. If you couple things together, scent, sound, texture, motion, for example, peppermint oil while studying, the same scent, you smell it before the exam, it can have an effect. The pathways in your brain make the connections. As crazy as that sounds, if you're doing it repeatedly, if you're doing the same types of things again and again, same processes, the memory remembers. You've got muscle memory. The brain is a muscle. It can do, the most articulate muscle of them all. So if you're telling it, right, I'm going to do these things in a certain way, and I'm going to do it again and again and again, your brain is going to remember those patterns. And associative memory helps recall contextually. So that's basically all of the above. Sounds, you listen to something energetic, and the information that you've got to encode is related to something energetic too, or something quick fire. The context matches, you might be able to recall it easier when you need to. Chunking and sequencing, breaking things down into manageable steps, manageable chunks. We've got a big, massive task in front of us. We can't tackle it all in one go. It's too big. We have to break it into manageable parts. Once we break it into the manageable parts, it's not just about, okay, we've got smaller things to deal with, great. We have to start applying some of the other strategies to those smaller parts. Like chipping away at each smaller chunk to make them even smaller, but meaningful. Because if we chip away at them and make them too small, it's going to become too fragmented, and that becomes the opposite. It becomes harder to remember. Lots of small fragmented bits. So break things down into manageable chunks, not the smallest chunk possible, but manageable steps, and then apply your visual, your audio, your spatial, sensory strategies. And the neurodivergent memory improves when info is grouped logically and sequenced, usually visually, like the storytelling example. Avoid long, unstructured lists. We need structure. We need to find a balance which works for us. Some digital tools which we can use. We've got OneNote, where you can structure information, you can make it visual, you can embed videos into it at the same time. Notion and Google Keep do similar things. Temu is one to look at for, not Temu, the Chinese site that you order things off of, but a different Temu. Speech to text tools help us verbalize the information, especially if we struggle with the internal monologue. We can use that. Pomodoro time, as we talked about previously as well. Visual clocks, externalizing the information to make it easier to articulate, manage, hold and reaccess later, and store and reaccess later rather. I know we're kind of at time. I've just got a couple of slides to go over with you. The importance of movement, sleep and nutrition. So we know that exercise boosts us in many ways, not just hippocampal function, but if you look back on the previous slides, the hippocampus is central to our memory, but exercise enhances that. There's studies, there's research out there which shows if we implement exercise into our routines, our memories naturally improve. Sleep consolidates memory. If we don't get enough deep sleep, and we're not getting enough sleep generally, but more importantly, deep sleep, full sleep cycles, we can't consolidate what's happened in the day. So sleep is essential. Making sense of the information the next day, if we haven't slept, it's a lot more difficult, isn't it? We haven't given our body the chance to consolidate the information that we've absorbed the previous day. So that's important. Things like diet, omega-3s, hydration, we know that that's essential too. We've got to make sure we drink enough fluids, we get enough nutrients in to be at our optimum best. Our brain needs that to work at its best. So multi-system health is key. And I always bring you back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. If we don't fulfill the bottom layer of the pyramid, then we can't do the higher level functions that we need to do, like recalling important information. So all of those things are fundamental alongside all the strategies. This is a strategy in itself, being well in yourself. And we were talking about emotions. So ways to feel less anxious. We've talked about this too in the past. Mindfulness, grounding techniques, things which can make us feel a sense of calm before we step into memorizing stuff, before we step into the tough, difficult tasks of information encoding, trying to get our information stored. We have to feel well. If we're not feeling well, if we're feeling stressed, if we're just not, we're annoyed whilst we're doing it, we're never going to remember it as easily. So run through techniques like this before you're going to embark on a session of study or something important that you're about to do, like note down when an appointment is. If you've got to book an appointment on the phone, go through breathing techniques before you pick up the phone. Be in a good space to encode and embed the information. Our memories thrive on it, and it's really important. And finally, I just wanted to summarize, really. Build a supportive memory environment for yourself. Externalize the memories, use sticky notes, shared calendars, visual reminders, and design your space for recall and not perfection. We can't be perfect in our memories. We're always going to forget something, but we can get very close to really good memory. It's not about, we've got a poor memory. It's about we need to improve our methods around memory, which can be improved because, as we know, our brains are neuroplastic. I always struggle to say that word. We can mold it. We can make it better. We're not stuck. We're not always with poor memory. We can always improve because the brain is very effective and amazing. So, yeah, has anyone got any thoughts on that? I've run over a little bit, but did anyone have any questions or anything else to share? Yes, Yorgo, go for it.
I just remembered something. So, like, you mentioned about memories, like ascent, that help us remember certain things. Well, whenever I try to remember something, it's to do with, like, say films or TV shows. So, say if I remember one thing, I think, okay, that was the same time the recent Marvel film came out. So all these little things that I'm very good at I remember those is when a film or TV show or anything that I'm passionate about happened around at the same time. So I literally remembered that and thought I would share it.
Yeah, thanks for that. That's a good memory by association. So you are experiencing those things in your everyday. You just need to think and remind yourself of those things, that those exist, and those are things that you can pick up and apply to other tasks, other things that you're doing. But yeah, I hope that's been helpful for everyone. And I know there was a lot of science kind of embedded into that. I didn't want to go too deeply into it, but I felt it was important to understand those things. And I want everyone to go away and just think about, especially the internal monologue, the theory of mind aspects of thinking what other people might be thinking and feeling, the emotional aspects around it all. And think, do you do that? Can you implement that into your repertoire of training your brain, improving your neural pathways in your brain? Once you start doing those things, let me know, report back to me and tell me, are things getting better? Is learning and memory more effective for you if you're thinking more about what you're doing and reflecting on, and talking to yourself more, talking to others more, thinking about what others may be thinking at that time? I hope that's helped, and I wish you all a great evening. Thank you for coming along again and supporting all of this. I'll put it up on YouTube, but otherwise have a great evening and keep